Oh, hello there and welcome to ZORANLAND. We are a entertaining website with fun club and social network. Please visit us at www.zoran-land.com and join our fun club. This is our Zealand entertainment.
Welcome to our Zealand Entertainment and thank you for choosing us. We are coming to you from the Springs Clubhouse in Novi, Michigan. And I'm sure in the beginning you're going to recognize my next guest is Mr. Beverly URIAS, who already was on my show already, and we were talking about Christianity. This time he's on the show with a different topic. The topic is Islam as a religion. Mr. URIAS, thank you for coming to the show. Let's talk about Islam. Last time we were talking about the Christianity, and now we don't want to put the Islam on the side. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Tell me what is Islam?
Islam is a faith that is primarily began at least in Asia. It's pretty much all over the world now in various different places. You can find Islam almost any place where you go. But it is a faith that began about 1,500 years ago, and it began because people at that time who came under the influence of the prophet were not walking righteously as he felt, and he had a vision, and he began to try to move people back into righteousness is a word that fits what they're talking about, but try to move them back to basic principles and honesty and integrity and those kinds of values. And the religion grew out of that. And so Islam actually means the right way. And there are various different we would call them in Christianity denominations, but I'm not really an expert in Islam, so I hope nobody considers me an expert.
No, we just want to.
But in any case, I do work with Muslims, and I've studied a lot.
Okay.
But that doesn't help you become a Muslim or an Islam expert. But in any case, there are various different factions and denominations, as it were, of Islam, very many of them. There are two primary ones in the United States that Shusis and Sunnis and Shuis that I work with in my chaplaincy program. But in Asia, I don't even know how they divide one from the other, but they do have a lot of things in common. For example, they pray 5 times a day, and these are not just prayers off the cuff or what we might call prayers of petition or something like that, but it may include that. But these are prayers they are required to pray if you are practicing Islam.
Okay.
And there are various other factors that become apparent once you start getting to know what Islam is about.
We said Islam is one of the 3 biggest religions in the world after the Christianity, with the Christianity and the Orthodoxy, right?
It is listed as the 2nd largest religion in the world.
Okay, can we repeat the number one more time? We did it in a previous show, but what is the number? How many?
I just looked at that recently, and I think it's about 1.5 billion.
1.5 billion. In the Christianity, we mentioned that the 3 main elements were the love, faith, and spirituality.
Right.
Tell me about the Islam. What are the basic elements of the Islam? Are they the same with Christianity?
The basic principles in Islam would be a scripture, which is Quran,
Okay.
and praying Quran and studying the Quran is primary.
Okay.
You're not a practicing Islam believer if you're not dealing with Quran on a daily basis. Prayers are very important in Islam. And the other thing is doing good deeds. And so it kind of translates similar to Christianity in some ways. The primary difference is the scripture. But that's an interesting thing. A lot of times when you read the Quran, which is their scripture, you will find passages in Islam that are so similar to the Christian Bible that it could be a paraphrase of either one of them. And when I talk to my students sometime, I'll quote something from the Christian scripture, and I said, what do you find in the Quran that's similar to that? And they can quote one, and they're very, very similar in many aspects.
When did Islam actually start as a religion?
1,500 years ago.
1,500 years ago. That's after the Christianity and
Right.
Orthodoxy. Okay.
Right.
What is the main place of Islam today?
Well,
We know the Christianity has the Vatican, and that's the main place, in Jerusalem, right?
right.
But for the Islam, what is the main place for the Islam?
It's hard to say where the main place is. It's Asia, and all of Asia, but it's beyond Asia. But the primary place for Islam is in Asia, and I know that's a wide space,
Yeah.
but I couldn't put my finger on. There is a place where they go in the fall for Hajj, which they go to every year, and I'm drawing a blank on exactly where that is right now.
Okay. What is actually the definition of the Islam?
The definition is the right way, primarily. That's it's an Asian word, and the language that they learn is Arabic,
Okay.
and it's an Arabic word that means the right way.
The right way. What are the symbols of the Quran?
I'm not very.
What are the symbols of the Islam? Let's say that, and I know the Quran is one of them. I'm assuming.
Well, I wouldn't call it a symbol. It is
Because
there.
you cannot imagine the Islam without the Quran.
Right.
So it must be one of the their symbols.
Well, you mean it symbolizes
The Islam as a
Islam
religion.
behavior or practice of Islam? Yes, that Quran is absolutely the most important thing. But as a matter of fact, Islamic people avoid symbols
They do?
and icons and things like that. That's a part of their training and a part of their value system.
Okay.
They try to avoid even pictures and symbols and icons and those kinds of things as much as possible.
Okay. We mentioned on a previous show, but I would like to hear it again. What is the closest religion to the Islam?
Well, there are three religions that came from the same source, and that is from Abraham, and Christianity followed. The Abrahamic religion was not Abrahamic religion, but the Jewish religion is the oldest source of these three.
Okay.
And Christianity grew out of Judaism, and then Iran followed Christianity. It didn't grow out of Christianity, but it goes back to the same source. The primary source is Abraham in the Hebrew Bible.
Okay.
So all three of these religions come out of Abraham. But there are some things, some religious traditions that may be closer to Islam than either of these two. But I'm not the one to compare them at this point.
How is the Hindu related with Islam?
Well,
Is that a part of the Islam?
Oh, absolutely
Okay.
not. Hindu, as a matter of fact, the Hindu religion is older than Judaism. So it was established many years before. Let me see, Hinduism was established 11,000 years ago. Judaism was established 6,000 years ago.
Do they have different beliefs?
Oh, absolutely.
Hindus and
Right,
Muslim?
right.
Okay. So there is no way we can compare those two.
Well,
because
you know, when
do
you
they have
start
any-
talking about
any-
comparing religions, our religions have some basic features for, I think, in any religion that I've ever studied, thou shalt not kill is true in every religion. In every religion, thou shalt not steal is true. I mean, there are basic tenements for any religion I've ever studied. That there are some things that are absolutely intolerable, and some things that are similar to other religions. But to compare them, I have not done a comparison. I never studied comparative religions, but there are courses that are taught by people who are more widely diverse than I am in their studies. And they would be able to, and I do have some information. As a matter of fact, someone is putting together a chart for me right now. And if this were a month from now, I'd be able to go down the chart and show you what the comparisons are.
Correct.
But there are comparisons.
Okay.
But I don't have them at the top of my head.
Okay. Is the spirituality involved in the Islam religion?
Oh, absolutely.
So they do have the spirituality.
Right,
in
right.
their okay.
But then spirituality is so different for different religions. As a matter of fact, some religions would not even use the term spirituality because it doesn't really make sense to them.
Okay.
But my definition of spirituality is anything that influences life.
Okay.
And for me, that would cover any religion, but there are other religions who would say, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I have to accept that.
Okay. What are the about the Quran? Tell me what is in the Quran?
Well, the Quran is the scriptures of the prophet that were dictated to the Prophet Muhammad from God. And so the Prophet Muhammad in Islam is God's prophet, and the Quran was dictated, and the prophet made known what was dictated to him for the people at that time, and it's just continued to spread. As a matter of fact, it's spreading now. Because people they had gotten beside themselves. There was a lot of war, a lot of fighting, a lot of struggle. They're killing, and people looked like they were just going to annihilate each other. And the prophet had this vision that said, we need to straighten this, need to get back to the basics, so to speak, to honesty, to truth, to integrity, to holiness, to righteousness. And so the way, which is what is written in the Quran, tells the Islamic people what is the right way to follow.
We know the Islam religion, they do not believe in Jesus. They accept him, but they do not believe in him. They believe in his father. They accept him as Jesus as a son of God.
Well, they do not believe Jesus as the Son of God. Islamic people do believe in Jesus. They believe they believe in Jesus as a prophet, a great prophet, but one of many prophets.
One of many, okay.
As a matter of fact, if I can interrupt you, they are required to read about Jesus and study Jesus and understand the principles that Jesus taught. Even as an Islamic follower, that's part of what they are expected to learn, because what Jesus taught is similar to what they are taught in the Quran.
Okay.
but they do not believe in Jesus as the Son of God, so they don't want him to be special like Christians do.
Okay. The Islam holidays. What are the main Islam holidays?
That's one of those things I wish I had a calendar in front of you so I wouldn't embarrass myself. But they celebrate.
Just name a few of them.
Right,
the biggest
right.
one. We don't have to go.
One
through.
of the big things about Islam is fasting.
Okay.
And they
What
have.
is fasting?
I'm sorry.
What is fasting? What that means?
Not controlling their eating. They can only eat at certain times.
And what is the reason for it? Do you know?
To discipline yourself. Fasting is one of the best ways in the world to discipline yourself because a lot of us eat too much. And we even have a name for it. We call it comfort food.
Oh, okay.
And when you're eating, particularly eating comfort food, you become laxed and undisciplined and just kind of go with the flow, so to speak. Fasting is not necessarily not eating at all, but choosing when to eat and what to eat to make sure that you are being disciplined about what you take in. And that affects what you take in, affects what comes out. And I used to fast about every quarter, 4 times a year. I would do a 3-day dry fast. I didn't eat or drink for 3 days. It was a very disciplined routine.
That's kind of hard.
Well, the truth of the matter is it was very pleasant. But I was single then, and so I didn't have somebody cooking and putting it in front of me. And so...
well, it's not pleasant for me when I'm trying to lose weight. And it's not pleasant, I'm kind of arguing with people because I'm hungry.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. What is Bayram?
I'm sorry.
Do you know what is Bayram?
Bayam?
Bayram.
I don't...
It's one of the holidays they have.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. Tell me about the freedom of the speech in Islam.
People are free to speak, and it is not a monarchy.
Okay.
But there are people in leadership in Islam, and they even have a council, and they have various different levels of council that make decisions about what is appropriate behavior for Islamic people. And so while people have the ability to speak freely, they do have the responsibility to behave within the guidelines, not only guidelines, but within the requirements of the faith. And so there's that, you know, like Christians have freedom of speech as well, but that doesn't mean you can go out and kill somebody, so to speak, or even speed on the road. That's really a violation of the law, and Christians are encouraged to obey the law. So freedom of speech doesn't mean you can do anything you want. And so from that point of view, Islam religion encourages freedom of speech, but also obedience to the law of the faith.
Okay. How about the woman in Islam?
That's a good question.
Like, I want to kind of get to the previous question, kind of put them together. How about women? Do they have a freedom of speech in Islam?
They do have a freedom of speech, but their husbands, I don't like to use this language, but it's kind of the husbands and the men have more authority than the women.
Power.
Yes, they have more power.
Okay.
They do not have the same freedom as the men have when you talk about freedom of speech.
Correct.
Now that also depends on which denomination that you're talking about. Some have absolutely no freedom, and in other cases, they are compelled to do what their husband says they need to do. But I don't want you to confuse Islam with other more radical religions where the men are in total control and women have no say-so at all. Even in Christianity, women are encouraged to follow the
lead the main
the lead of their husbands.
Correct.
So it's not. It may be a little stronger in Islam, but not burdensome.
Is that true? The Islam religion is one of the fastest growing religion in the world.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do you know why?
Well, because I can only guess from what I've seen. But for one thing, they work at it. They reach out to people, and particularly people in prison, because in prison, in the first place, you have a captive audience because you can't get away. But that's not the reason that it works. It works because when people are in prison, they're confined, and it feels like oppression, and in some ways it is oppression. How that came about is something for another discussion. But people feel oppressed while they're in prison. Anybody feels oppressed when they're under control by somebody else. And so Islamic people make it their business to visit them and extend relationship to them and to teach them and open up to them possibilities that they may never have considered before going to prison. And so they gain an insight that was not available to them before. And so from that point of view, they work at it. But they not only work at it in prison, they work at it with people, as you are probably aware, there's a lot of political upheaval in Asia from time to time, from place to place. And there are a number of Islamic people who constantly come under oppression as a result of that. And other Islamic people reach out to them and bring comfort and security and help to them in many ways. I have persons that I relate with here who raise money and provide services for Islamic people, and particularly Muslims. And people are overwhelmed because that's part of their religion, helping others. And so all you need is an honest person who has a vision of how to help others, and you can channel your money through that organization and help a lot of people. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it grows. I think Christians tend to be more concerned about themselves. There was a time when Christianity grew rapidly, and that's the only reason now I think it's the largest religion in the world. But Islam is growing rapidly because they continue to be helpful to people in whatever way they find them.
How hard is for a person to leave the Islam religion and go to something else like Christianity or Orthodoxy? Is it harder for them to do it, or for Christian to go?
Well, people do that, and people go from Christianity to Islam. They go back and forth.
But how hard is for the Islam people to leave
to adjust,
their religion?
you mean?
To leave their religion and get another religion?
Well, particularly in this country, because people just do move to wherever they want to move and relate to whomever they want to relate. And so there's freedom to move back and forth and go one place or the other. And nobody will stop them. If somebody is a Christian or a Jew or Hindu or
So it's a
whatever.
free country here. They can do whatever
They
they
do
want.
whatever they want to
Yeah.
do. Nobody's going to attack them or persecute them for their decision.
How about Islam in politics? How is the Islam rated in politics today? And
And this is an area where I'm not really, don't know as much about it, but Islamic people tend to be very political. They have to be, because they live in an area and they have lived in an area where there's been political strife. There was political strife when the religion was born. And it's constantly been religious strife and political strife. And you have to strive somewhat to be an Islamic person. You can't get comfortable. You have to always speak out. As a matter of fact, something I learned from the Muslim persons is, if you experience something that you feel is unjust, the religion requires you to do three things, three possible things. One is, if it's unjust, you should do something about it. And if you're not in a situation where you can do something about it, you should say something about it. And if you don't feel that you're in a situation where you can even say anything about it, you should, even within yourself, not incorporate it into your thinking or accept it within yourself. And this is something that they practice and they see themselves requiring of themselves. And this is kind of political, and most of the time it has to do with political issues. And so they're never to accept passively anything that they are against.
do you think the Islam affects people's right in a modern society?
People's
Rights.
right to what?
Rights to freedom. Even when, let's say, when actually this was a question that I heard when I was going to school. There was a problem when a lady went to Secretary of State to redo her license, and they gave her a hard time about wearing the scarf around her head.
Right.
And that's a right for the person to,
Right, of course.
she doesn't want to take it off. So
Right.
do you think that those regulations have to be different for certain people, or
You know,
in that case, what are we going to do?
that's a tremendously good question, because we come to this country for freedom of religion. That's one of the main reasons people have come to this country and why this country has developed as much as it has. And wearing the scarf and the veil, and there are various different levels. You know, some people wear the scarf, but they don't cover their face, and
Correct.
others wear
Some of them they do.
they cover part of it, and so forth and so on. But whatever they do, and they're real serious about this. It's not just a fashion. This is a
Correct.
part of their religion. And so there have been people, for example, who've been called into court as a witness who are Islamic. And judges have required them to remove their veils so that somebody could see them, because that's the way we practice law. But they have resisted that because that's a violation of their religion and of their personhood. And so I don't think anybody, especially me, could say this is what ought to be and what ought to be. I know, I look at it from this point of view. Sometimes when you have children in court, they're not required to sit in the court and make statements because that's too threatening for them, and you don't get the kind of witness that you would expect from an adult. And even some persons, like the governor, for example, has to answer some questions under oath. They're not going to take him to court and swear him in. but they do this in a room, in a private room. They take a deposition, as they call it, in a private room, and so that way the information is gathered in privacy that is respectful for the person, whether it's a child or a governor for that matter. And that's one way to get around the problem. Well, I think that's one of the ways that we might deal with some of these issues when it comes to testimony, at least. But when it comes to your license, I mean, it's supposed to be a picture of a picture ID, and if the
way you
veil
look
is
every
there,
day, I guess.
I'm sorry.
A picture of you the way you look every day.
Exactly.
Okay, so actually the modern society kind of affects the
That's
religion.
true. So it defeats the whole purpose of the picture ID.
Correct.
But then I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps what we need to do is advance our ID by using our thumb or something like that in lieu of facial ID. But that probably is some distance out before we do have thumb ID, but it's not
because people who come to United States, like these people that we are talking about with the veil and stuff like that,
right.
They have the regulations in their country.
That's true.
And they cannot break them there.
That's true.
But when they come to country with a modern society, when some requirements are needed, then do you think that they should respect the regulations and rules from this country?
Well, I think that is true, and
because every country is different. They have different rules, different laws. So you're kind of hurting one person, but you're kind of hurting your law. You're not following the law, so it's kind of a little bit.
You know, I look at it from both sides.
Yeah.
And I want the person to have the freedom to practice their religion wherever they are.
Wherever they, yeah.
But then we also have some traditions that give men, who allow men to literally kill a woman in their family. This happened recently. It was on the news. And
I believe it.
And other ways in which they abuse women, not Islamic people, but other religious traditions.
It happens everywhere, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we would not tolerate that in this country, regardless of what they would do in another country.
Correct.
And so there has to be a line drawn at where something has to change if they choose to live in this country.
Correct.
And where that line should be drawn is a question and a lot of conversation, I think. But my personal feeling is that we should extend the freedom of religion as far as we can tolerate it and still be able to function in this country. And if there's another way to identify a person other than their face, then we should figure out a way to do that. But that's, as I said, that's in the future.
How about the marriage is in Islam?
That's interesting. Marriages are, what do they call that? Arranged in Islam. And I was a little surprised when I learned that.
Why that happens?
It's part of the tradition.
It's a tradition.
And that's cultural. That's not religious necessarily. But there's, as a matter of fact, culture and religion overlap each other a lot in all religions. And it certainly does in Islam. And so marriages are arranged in Islam. They have very, very strict jurisprudence, they call it, in terms of the behavior of females and males that are not a part of their immediate family. For example, the veil that we talked about. If the person is at home, they can take off the veil. But if they go out of the house, and they're wearing the veil. They have to keep that veil on. Nobody outside of the immediate family should see their face. And
Do you know the reason for it?
it's a part of their
Just a tradition.
and part of their culture. And you can't separate culture and religion. They don't walk separate lines. You know, they're one is integrated into the other, and vice versa. But these laws are to protect the woman primarily, and protect her modesty and protect her from a man taking advantage of her in any way. And so when it comes to dating, they have very, very strict rules about dating, and then the marriages are arranged, and the family, the person getting married is expected to follow the recommendation, if not the demand, of the parent who arranged the marriage. And so when you talk about freedom, this is one place where, for us at least, it would appear that freedom has been restricted, because they can't just go out and date anybody, and they can't just have lunch with anybody, and it's just, as a very, you know, for me it seems very restrictive, but when I was a kid, that was the way it was, even in the Christian church. You know, you stay clear of a person of the opposite sex, because not that anybody intended anything to happen, but it would happen anyway.
Is it true that in Islam, that the Islam allows the man to have more than one wife?
I think that is true in some circles, certainly not here. And
is it legal here?
no, it's not legal here.
Yes.
It's not legal here.
Okay.
And
So even if you're from Islam religion here, you cannot.
no,
It's
no.
not okay.
As a matter of fact, what I was getting at is, in the Mideast, there's everybody in the Mideast is not Islamic. And a lot of people get confused and mixed up about certain behaviors and things that happen in countries in Asia that are not Islamic. But as far as I'm aware, the Islamic religion expects you to have one wife. But there are other traditions in Asia that
From the Islamic.
right, that are not Islamic.
Oh, they're not Islamic.
There's not Islamic.
Okay.
They and I wouldn't swear that that's not true in some versions or some because there's so many different. I just call them denominations because it's easier for me to understand. And so there are things that are accepted and not accepted depending on the culture. And so I wouldn't say that you would be kicked out of the Islamic faith if you have more than one wife. But that's something I really can't say for sure.
Okay.
But you can't do it here, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I know that. Okay. I think we cover a lot about the Islam as a religion. For all those who didn't check our Christianity video clip, please check it out so you can kind of compare them with this one. And please feel free to add comments under the video or suggestions so we can go through it next time. Mr. URIAS, thank you for coming to the show.
You're very welcome.
We'll see you next time with another topic.
Okay.
And thank you for choosing ZORANLAND Entertainment.
Hey, it's me again. Thanks for watching our show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for the next show, please email me at zoran zoran-land.com. See you next time.